You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
This is the voice of world control. I bring you peace. It may be the peace of plenty and content, or the peace of unburied death. The choice is yours. Obey me and live, or disobey and die.
Touch your body as a man have touched you. But I'm going to show you things which human eyes have never seen. In the privacy of a woman's room, against her will, the inconceivable act.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we're talking about aliens and Spielberg's dad, so join the sleaze. Come on now.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an honor shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for over 5 years. There's like 130, 140 bonus episodes, as well as our bonus transmission series, where we talk about new release genre movies, and we got some big ones on the way. So if you haven't made the jump yet, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. And speaking of which, we did have a bunch of people make the jump this week. So we'll give them their shout outs here. We had Logan Giesman, Reese Paul, David Witten Davis, Emiliano Biez, Karen Bathaja, Winnipeg Bisk, Claire Casey, who signed up for an entire year of the show at a slightly discounted rate. You can do that if you're interested. Zach Armstrong signed up. Who Cares signed up. DC, the Golden Hour, Jake Marston, and last but not least, Jake Marston for a whole year of the show at the $10 a month rate. So he's going to be joining us for the virtual screenings. Thank you, Jake. And last but not least, Casey Emmerling. So thanks so much to you folks. Hope you're enjoying those bonus episodes.
Yeah, thank you.
We appreciate the support. That's the one plug for the week. The other plug, as always, is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you were listening on either one of those platforms, and I see the stats, I see you right now listening on both those platforms. Give us a good old rating and review down at the bottom. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners. And the very last plug, as always, is merch. If you like the poster art that based out of Toronto horror artist Trevor Henderson did for the show, you can get that put on basically anything that you can think of. A pillow, a hoodie, a notebook, just a poster for your apartment. That link is in the description of this episode, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com for anyone interested. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I think 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks over on the main feed would have heard from us, and we would have had special returning guest Andrew Law of the Bunta Vista podcast on to go couch potato mode with us and discuss sketch comedies centered around television sets in Weird Al Yankovic's UHF from 1989, as well as Peter Hyams's Stay Tuned from 1992, one of the more kind of like oddball, underseen movies of that era, ripping off like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Back to the Future, and lots of wacky television pastiche parodies going on in both films.
Yeah, and I did find a new love for Weird Al after UHF, so it was a good time. Highly recommend.
Definitely. So we haven't heard that episode. That was over on the main feed 2 weeks ago. And then last week over on the bonus feed, because there's some renewed interest around one of our favorite filmmakers on this show, Wes Craven, who we did our very first episode of the show on Hills Have Eyes. There is a new Scream out. And we decided that since we've already covered all of the Scream films, a more interesting use of our time on the show would have been to talk about some kind of underseen B-sides of Wes Craven. So we talked about his post-Nightmare on Elm Street success, movies where he was sort of making his own off-brand sequels to them, where he did a movie in 1986 called Deadly Friend and a movie called Shocker in 1989, both films concerned with teens versus adults and dreams and brutal supernatural murders. If you haven't seen Shocker, in my opinion, it is an essential Craven text. It is the movie he claims to have had the most artistic control over. He wrote it. It's
you
all
can tell.
about it's all about his abusive father and sort of, rejecting the generational violence.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, you can definitely tell between the two which one he had more control over, because Deadly Game has some fun things in it, but some strange choices tonally.
Yeah, but there is a basketball head explosion in that one too.
Yeah, so it's worth the
That
watch.
that was worth a lot of fun. So if you haven't heard that episode, that was over on the Patreon last week. Go back and check it out if you're interested. But moving on to this week, we have a very special guest joining us for the first time. He is the head of content over at The Ringer, where a good friend of the pod, Adam Naiman, regularly writes film reviews for, was come up on the show before. And he is also the host of the Big Picture podcast over there. And that guest is Sean Fennessey. Sean, how are you doing?
Hi, boys. Thanks for having me. It's so exciting to be here and talk about films that I probably would not get a chance to talk about on my show, or at least not at the length that we're about to talk about them. So I appreciate being here.
Exactly. No, that every time we get asked to guest on people's show, that's our exact process too. We always try to talk about post 2000 horror films and stuff. So we never talk about them on our show. So let's go. Let's do it. Sean, we're very glad to have you. Wanting to have you on for a little while. And as the show goes, I'm sure we asked the guests to bring the double feature with them. So what two films have you brought with you this week, and why did you pair them together?
Well, I landed on science fiction in part because science fiction is simultaneously the most important genre category and also the most overlooked, in my opinion. And I'm fascinated by the studio science fiction movies of the 1970s. So I've chosen two for us. The first one is from 1970. It's called Colossus, the FORBIN Project, and it involves AI. And the second one is from 1977, and it is also about AI, and it's called Demon Seed. And they are both incredibly strange, but for incredibly different reasons. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they fit together and how maybe they don't.
Yeah, this is a cool double feature of post 2001 70s AI gone wrong thrillers. Lots of wonderful analog production design and screens and dials, and humans scared that a machine is going to be killing them. One approached more, I guess, in sort of like bodily autonomy, anxiety, horror, and more, and kind of like an absurd sort of like Cold War paranoia. But I had not seen either of these films, and I actually hadn't even heard of Colossus, which is it's pretty rare that someone brings on something that I was just not aware of at all. And which also, considering Joseph Sargent, I feel like I should have been more aware. I just clearly should have been checking out his catalog a little bit deeper. He has some films in there. So, but that being said, I think we are going to do this double feature chronologically here. So we are going to start things off with Colossus, the FORBIN Project.
The missile has just been launched. It is heading towards the Cyan-Sibirsk oil complex.
Guardian has retaliated.
Retaliated? It may be too late, sir.
Oh my God.
All right, we are talking Colossus, the FORBIN Project, the 1970 American science fiction thriller film directed by Joseph Sargent and based on the 1966 novel Colossus by one Dennis Jones. And this is, I think, our third time talking about Joseph Sargent, the New Jersey filmmaker who started in the world of TV with things like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Gunsmoke, but is most well known for his very tough and gritty 70s action films that we've covered, including the Burt Reynolds vehicle White Lightning, his first time playing the character of Gator, and featuring tons of outlaw moonshining and prison escapes and car chases. And Sargent did a really competent job taking over for Spielberg, who was originally meant to direct that film. But more famously, probably, is his riveting logistical New York subway heist film, The Taking of Pelham 123 from 1974. A movie I was actually just thinking about last night because I just saw the Cannon film Runaway Train on a print.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
And I was like, not just because it's dirty men on a train in a thriller, but also because there's a lot of cutting to the control rooms and just the breakneck pace of the sort of pursuit element of it. And I remember when we talked about Pelham, we were just in love with how peppered that was with great character actors being angry New Yorkers who are good at their jobs. And the way that movie moves from like the train to the control room to the cops up top to the people underground to the mayor's office, just like this following this line of broken communication and the process and deliberation of all of the planning that they are putting through and stuff like that, which I would say that this contains a tiny bit of. I could see a little bit in some of the later tense sequences that happen in this film, but just not quite in the same like ode to desperate working people in the same way that Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 is, as this film.
Yeah, there's not as much urgency in the FORBIN project.
Yeah, as and that's partially based on the material, because instead this film is about a Dr. Charles Forbin, played by Eric Braeden of Young and the Restless fame, as well as Larry Cohen's The Ambulance.
Nice.
I wanted to bring that one up, but yeah, Young and the Restless he's been on that show for like 70 years or something. He's like unbelievable. He's like one of the most affectless actors of all time, and he definitely brings that demeanor to this character, where he is the lead architect of a supercomputer called Colossus that is meant to run America's nuclear defenses. But of course, similar to the film we're going to talk about next, Demon Seed, it takes its programming logic to the extreme. It overthrows its masters and becomes sentient. And unlike the more sort of personal stakes of what it decides to do from there in Demon Seed, this one instead decides to take over the entire world's supply of weapons for the good of mankind and end all war through the domination of man.
Yeah,
but Sean, for you, what was your first experience with this one? What stood out to you on first watch?
You know, about 5 years ago, I got obsessed with James Bridges, who is the screenwriter of this movie and who had a fascinating career as a director, and also, you know, got to start writing in TV for Alfred Hitchcock Presents and shows like that. But, you know, this is the guy who directed The China Syndrome and The Paper Chase and Urban Cowboy, and, you know, was
he wrote White Hunter, Black Heart?
He did, yes. I mean, wow. I think Clint changed that script quite a bit, but he did write the screenplay for that film, and is perhaps the most underrated filmmaker of the late 70s and early 80s. So about 5 years ago, I started getting obsessed with everything that he had done and kind of trying to track everything down, because he's not as well chronicled. And I literally couldn't find Colossus, the Forbin Project, other than on a stray Vimeo link that someone had uploaded to the internet. And since then, it has been like issued on Blu-ray, and it's available to purchase on, you know, Apple and iTunes and Amazon and all those places. But it felt like a little bit of a lost object. And it's a very strange movie because it collides two things I really, really like. One is, as I said, the sort of tense post-2001 science fiction film, but it's also a Halls of Power movie. Like, it's very similar to like 7 Days in May, Doctor Strangelove, Failsafe.
Yeah, Doctor Strangelove and Failsafe, hugely. That was what I was thinking about a lot while watching this.
Yeah, Cold War thrillers, right? And that are and like important men in rooms being concerned about the future. And I just really like those kinds of movies. And so I brought those two things together. It's not nearly as good as any of those movies. So I don't want anybody to go in expecting a Failsafe-esque masterpiece. But it's an amazing like object of curiosity for the time. You know, it's like a post-Summer of Love story about fucking and a robot. And it's a lot of fun, even though it's incredibly sober at the same time, with one of the more dour endings of the early 70s.
Yeah, it has more of like I was surprised while watching it, because it definitely like makes its way to a very bleak kind of 70s ending, but it does so in a way that I just found like strangely kind of like slow and creeping and kind of dry in an interesting way. Like it feels like Sargent approached it, and you know, unlike what we'll talk about in Demon Seed, where there's this very thick atmosphere to that film, this one it has some paranoid thriller elements to it and some scenes that crop up, but for the most part it definitely feels more akin to just like reading. It felt like when I would read sci-fi. It has like a very spare, functional visual style to it. It's very much highlighting the mundanity of these men in their boardrooms and in the gray suits and all the sort of like analog tech of everything that they do. And you could tell it almost right off the bat when it starts on like this creepy typewriter credits all over the, machinery and the technology and the lights and the dials and the compartments and everything like that, eventually pulling out from the intricacies to basically see the full room-sized Colossus computer dwarfing Dr. Forbin, obviously. He throws in a couple cool little low-angle shots and sort of overhead images interspersed throughout this opening to kind of give you the idea that, man is about to be have his power challenged from him a little bit.
Yeah, there's also this calculated kind of vibe to it too, with how it's shot. Like there's a lot of very symmetrical and still frames, like the one where he's crossing the bridge, for instance, and it's just like this bird's eye view, very symmetrical, and then they turn around and as they're closing it, it's the same way. It just feels very calculated, much like the characters in the laboratory themselves.
Yeah, which is interesting because, the rest of the film, like as soon as we find out kind of like what the premise is and like we see that this is all inside an underground base in the mountains. And again, an idea that's going to crop up in both of these films is also the sort of the natural versus the tech world a little bit. There's a lot of times where human characters, in order to escape the computer, like go outside and observe the beautiful vistas and stuff like that. But in this case, it is like, here's Mr. Dr. Forbin, who's just built this computer, huge success. The president and the media is waiting outside to congratulate him and, do a White House press conference where they are going to announce the defense of the free world is now the responsibility of this advanced machine, which is going to monitor all electronic devices and transmissions and data communications. And it is completely self-sufficient and self-generating and impenetrable. And anytime someone says words like that in a movie like this, you just have to go, oh, wonderful.
This is going to work out perfectly.
They've cracked the code for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I appreciate is that there's not a lot of throat clearing about that. It's literally within 5 minutes we're like, this isn't going to work out. This thing is going to have a mind of its own pretty quickly. A lot of times they really like I think of a movie like Contact. Contact kind of takes its time to reveal its true science fiction nature. This is just like this robot has advanced far too quickly. This supercomputer is going to be in charge in a short period of time. But the one thing that I really like about this movie is that it's not just one supercomputer. It's a pair of supercomputers that sort of
very
meet
true
in the darkness, like strangers in the night, and find each other and then seek each other out. So it's
kind of a romance when you think about it.
It is. It's a love story, honestly, and that's kind of. And then there's, I'm sure we'll talk about there is also this idea of privacy that Forbin and Dr. Cleo are pursuing in an attempt to kind of draw out and get some private space so that they can maneuver around Colossus's strategy to take over the world. But it's this it's an odd meditation on these very exciting and kind of like emotionally volatile things, but told in the stiffest, most sterile manner you can ever imagine.
Exactly. Yeah. Stiff and sterile. Exactly how I would describe the experience of watching this movie.
Yeah, because even in the Demon Seed, they end up adding kind of a voice to the AI a bit, but when they get to the voice with Colossus, it's very much just like a dry, monotone, robotic kind of thing. There's still there's a complete lack of humanity with the Colossus machine, whereas they kind of almost try to make it a little bit more human. It's deceivingly that way in Demon Seed, but with Colossus, it's just very straightforward with it.
It gets a little maniacal and kind of unhinged, whereas this, it's like, no, it is just following the programming logic of ending wars.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is don't trust humans with their weapons is the ultimate thing. I need to dominate man, and so that man can't be trusted with these weapons that they're going to use on each other. Ultimately, is the kind of idea it comes with. But I do love that in the opening, they're very excited, and there's a couple off kilter elements, like some shots that are filming the human faces through the broadcasting camera monitors, and the way that the camera will dolly through the press conference, highlighting sort of the overlooming presence of this giant computer. But before everyone can get too happy and drunk, Sean's right, almost immediately they're the computer starts sending warnings. They're there's another system out there. And I also like that the system communicates, because Jamie was mentioning that they they eventually give it a voice, but it takes a long time for this to get a voice. Most of this movie is the Colossus communicating via these giant text bars that it types out. And it's telling them, there's a Soviet system out there, and that means that, either, it's been built first and even better, better, or that, you know, the Colossus has even more computational power than they thought and can even detect more things than they thought. Or maybe there's a Russian agent. I love that they immediately come to like 4 different conclusions about the idea of what this warning means.
The paranoia just continues. It just grows.
Yeah, but I also love that the sense of like formal tension of it is like how slow the communication device is. That
I love that clattering teletype sound. You know, it's like an old cash register pumping out an old receipt. You know, like that specific sound design is so cool.
Yeah, and FORBIN is constantly being like, you know, but you have to speak with very precise, exacting language because, you know, this thing is going to take whatever you say completely literally. And at the same time, it's going to take like an entire minute to respond in a sentence because it can only do like 2 or 3 words kind of at a time. And it's just constantly typing to them on their big screen. But they eventually do get concerned about this additional computer, and they give the Colossus the permission to go and communicate with this computer and have this romantic connection with the Soviet computer, which seems on its face like a really terrible idea. But the president gives the go-ahead, and they develop their own language using like arithmetic and calculus, which gets them even more paranoid because they're like, oh no, now these computers are communicating with one another, and we don't know what they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I also love the presentation on the like when they start to show the surveillance of the computer. Like you were mentioning some of the shots where they kind of turn into, you know, you can see kind of like the data and they do focuses on people's faces, but also like when they cut back to the camera themselves, and a lot of the time it's the camera as the eyes, and they have like lights behind them and it almost makes like a face almost. And they do a similar thing, not as much with the lights making like a full face, but they do a similar thing with Demon Seed too, which we'll get to, of course. But I like that it essentially becomes the camera itself becomes like the window to communicating with the AI. It's kind of like the only, it's essentially their eyes, right? So it kind of is like the only human thing in a sense where they're looking at something and talking to them, something that's physically there, I guess.
Mm-hmm. There's also something really fascinating about the way the movie is cast, because it does remind me of 2001 in a lot of different ways. But one of them is, you know, Keir Dullea is this sort of like blank, affectless performer, and his interaction with Hal raises this question of sort of like, who is the human and who is the AI? And this is not a person with like scintillating charisma, and that seems like a purposeful choice that Kubrick makes. And the same is true for almost the entire cast of Colossus. Like it is a series of people who you've probably seen before, but no one that you would ever say, oh, I love that person, you know, or like, I'm so attracted to their energy. Like everyone is just kind of banal, like handsome in a dull way. You know, the idea of like sexuality is very muted. The idea of even like power and leadership amongst the president or the director of the CIA or the Russian premier, there's something very tight about everything that's happening in the movie, very controlled. And so it allows Colossus really to be the star. I mean, Colossus is the main character of the movie. Yeah.
I also like speaking of like the control, I like how like there's a lot of moments where they kind of like we were talking about the camera spin around the room when they're working on the AI itself, and it represents both, I think, like, you know, the AI watching them, as well as just a great way of showing like these people at work in their entire space. But I also like the kind of the high tech reveals that they have in this, like when they're just in a random room, I think it's with the president, and they're talking about something, and they talk about having to go into a different room to discuss communications, and then this big curtain, like black curtain, just kind of starts to lift up and reveal a whole communications computer room on the other side. And there's just these like 70s ideas of high tech that I really thought were interesting, and I like just how I don't know. I've always liked the way that like the 70s kind of visualized the future in some way, because I don't think like they have video calls in this as well, and I didn't think that was a thing in the 70s. So it was just cool for them to. I always love seeing those ideas from the past, and especially ones that have kind of. They become a reality for us. So the
science fiction authors were dreaming of how we would one day communicate.
Have FaceTime.
With each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. With
it does remind me of the vid call in Blade Runner, right? Like it's very similar the way that it's kind of executed and works. It's not quite a payphone, but it's close.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting too is that obviously all of that sort of like technological development is then tied to this sort of overwhelming danger that is on top of it, where the scariness of their situation is amplified by the idea of, well, now our computer is communicating with a Soviet computer and also has control of our weapons and their weapons, and we don't know what they're saying or what secrets they're sharing with anybody. And it's so funny that like the overwhelming threat of what they have created is actually a better sort of like healing tool between the countries, because both the Americans and Russians are like, oh shit, I guess we should cooperate with one another, right? You know, to shut these machines down and break these communications, and you know, because like they're about to overthrow all of us. And like straight up the Colossus like, if link not restored, action will be taken immediately. And by action, it's saying like, yeah, we're going to launch missiles at like random oil fields and army bases and just start all kinds of nuclear war that you guys are going to have to deal with. And part of the interest in them agreeing to reestablish the connection between the computers is not even that it's going to happen, but it's that they don't want to know that they did it. Like there's this whole like cover, like sort of like media cover up, because they don't want it to be revealed that they've all been strong armed by their own computer systems that they just announced at press conferences.
There was at one point in the movie where I was starting to think they were going to do this almost funny idea where the AIs came together so that they could create a situation in which the humans had to, you know, properly communicate and come together and find
the
peace
computers were going to go
other.
Dr. Manhattan
and that was
mode.
their grand scheme the whole time. Yeah. They were doing it for the good. There are some moments in there that are pretty humorous. We
created world peace by doing this.
Yeah.
Do you think that we've had experiences like that we don't know about, where news has been in our country has been propagandized by the government at this level? Like there is some massive cover up happening in Russia during the film.
I would believe it for sure. Roswell, come on now.
There you go.
There it is. Absolutely.
Yeah, but it also gets into, as Sean was pointing out, and I think in a more interesting way as the film gets into more of its second half, is the surveillance aspect of it, the early surveillance aspect of it, which would obviously tap into an entire 70s paranoid genre. We just talked about like the parallax view on the show not that long ago, and it was something I thought a little bit about during one of the espionage sequences that takes place in this.
Totally.
But there's this element where Colossus is now, you know, tapping into the White House phone, and he is taking full control of the human bodies through the power, where he's being like, you know, I want FORBIN in all caps. Colossus is typing, and if action is not taken, you know, then he is going to, you know, start blowing more things up, or he's going to blow up Washington, I think he says at one point. But because at this point, FORBIN is like, you know, he's like, okay, we need to shut down this computer, and we need to do it without the computer knowing it. So he's on like full on like international spy missions to the lead architect of like the Russian computer. And there's like these cool helicopter shots and these like long paranoia thriller zooms that are being done of men in suits meeting with one another, conversing privately, trading documents, all this kind of stuff. That results in a pretty cool sequence where the computer straight up assassinates the lead architect of the Russian computer by basically threatening the Russian government that, you know, it's going to, you know, launch one of their missiles. But we don't see that. We only hear that that's the reason it happened after the fact. What we get is the vision of the just designer being assassinated and executed, and it gives the impression almost that the computer is like controlling the people who did it, even though really it's just, you know, just threatening them in order to do it. But it's a creepy little sequence, I thought. One of the more like tense moments in the film.
It kind of gives off that commentary on like the paranoia that would be going on at that time too, just given that it's like eventually things do happen where, you know, the computer says a certain threat and then does that thing. But at first it almost feels like they're killing their own men just because they're like, well, this could happen because this AI is so hyper intelligent. And I think it directly relates to that paranoia, that kind of circular paranoia that was happening at the time.
Yeah, it's also like for a movie that is an otherwise like austere war room kind of film, just turns into a Bond movie for 15 minutes. You know, it's just a huge tonal shift. It's all about set pieces. It's all about location. Like the movie otherwise like really has nothing to do with that, with the exception of some of the exterior shots of the where the base is. But it's an indoor movie, except for this little kind of exciting. It almost feels like a studio note in a way, where it's like we got to get out of outside and we got to get a gun. We got to have a moment where someone gets shot because the movie is otherwise just like this.
We want to put some shots in the trailer.
Yeah, this is a thriller. Sometimes we promise.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's just interesting about the moment is because Sargent has taken such like a, I don't know, I guess kind of like a restrained approach to the filmmaking. This execution almost seems like it happens like a piece of like robotic machinery. It's just like, they're meeting with a guy. All of a sudden, all these men in suits are there. He's gone. FORBIN is taken into the helicopter and taken back to the base, where he's basically like put in, like sent to his room. He's put on detention. He's just like, Colossus is like, FORBIN, I love you. You're my creator. I need you. But you're going to be on 24-hour surveillance now, and any disobedience that you do is going to cause a missile to Washington. It results in him like doing these more comedic. This is where the movie gets a little bit sillier for me in kind of a fun way, but in kind of a way that once again does seem to disrupt a little bit of the fabric of what it's been going for the whole time. When he starts like micromanaging his entire day down to a science of it, where it's like, you exercise from this time to this time, you shower, you eat breakfast, and it results in and it results in this hilarious plan where he needs to pretend that one of his scientists, Susan Clark, is his mistress, so that he can get privacy when they want to have sex, and that's the excuse for it.
That scene where he explains it to her, I couldn't help but think like this was just his elaborate plan to get a date with her the entire time.
It was all a ruse. It was all a ruse.
He's like, I'm going to make this giant supercomputer during the Cold War, and I'm going to get that date. I'm telling you.
Well, and but also Colossus also has like a bit of sense of humor about it. Like Colossus starts like berating him about like how much sex he needs. He's arguing him down. He's being like, well, you don't really need it every night. Like, what about like 4 nights a week? Like that feels more reasonable for a human man of your age. And it also takes place in a scene where it's a very 60s scene of the Colossus berating him for putting too much vermouth in his martini.
Absolutely.
Again, what this almost does, I think Sean's almost right. These feel like they have to have been studio notes from like the Bond era, where they're like, well, can Eric Braeden like drink a martini, and can the computer like tell him how to make the perfect martini?
Yeah, can he not be just the most boring person of all time while this is happening?
I haven't read the original novel, D.F. Jones's novel, but I will say James Bridges his sense of humor is very underrated. I mean, the movie that his directorial debut came out the same year as Colossus, and it's called The Baby Maker. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this one. It stars a very young Barbara Hershey, and it's about a hippie girl who's hired by a middle-class family to give birth to a child. And it's a drama, but it has a lot of comedy in it. And he has like a real perverse sense of humor, especially around the conventions of sex. I mean, this is the guy who made Urban Cowboy. Like, this is something that he's interested in. So I think that everything that those odd quirks of story where you're like, where's this tonal whiplash coming from, feels to me most like James Bridges. Because, Joseph Sargent, like you guys know, if you've seen his movies, he makes these like very sturdy, character-driven mission movies. And like White Lightning and Taking of Pelham, and even like the TV movies he made in the 80s. Like, he never made another science fiction movie. He doesn't really evince much interest in the like formal nature of the storytelling, but he is like really good with people talking in rooms. And so my gut is that Bridges was like, I have some jokes I want to get off, and so this was how he thought about it.
Yeah.
So he's like, what if we had an extended date sequence where Eric Braeden and Susan Clark need to perform this romantic date night and literally strip in front of the Colossus cameras before entering the bedroom, just to have a conversation about how, they need to find a way to overpower the computer without him actually, watching and seeing them doing it. But it's also done in this like, Eric Braeden, he's sexy, he's under the sheets, and and he's just like, I don't have any put any hope in sabotaging the system. We need to focus on the weapons. And meanwhile he's like making googly eyes, and he's wearing no clothes, and it's just it's kind of hilarious. Honestly, I enjoyed it.
It is. The way they shoot it too is kind of funny, and I don't like it. It's still oddly dry, but there still seems to be some humor implied.
The shot of her nude, but through the wine glass or whatever, was a great shot.
Like that's from Austin Powers, which is like, well, obviously later on, but it's just funny that like that same idea was used in a slightly more serious way in this movie. And they do a similar thing too when they go into the bedroom. And I believe Susan Clark it's either Susan Clark or Eric are standing behind the person that's in the bed, and their head as they lay down is blocking their private parts the entire time. So I was like, this is some great nudity choreography right now. Pretty good.
I think there's also like the conspiracy thriller is obviously usually considered a drama, but there are some really good conspiracy comedies, like The President's Analyst with James Coburn as an example. Like it is a weirdly a good format for this kind of storytelling. I just don't think the movie was sold that way, nor is the first 40 minutes really like representative of anything funny. But then when it makes that pivot, it is like it makes you re-appreciate the movie. Because the first time I watched the film, I was like, this movie is borderline incoherent. Like it is not really, it doesn't really know what it wants to be, and it doesn't totally work. And for whatever reason, I tried it again. And the second time I watched it, I was like, this is kind of a masterpiece of like hopscotching around different styles within the same format. And the sex stuff is kind of what jumps out to me. The whole idea of outwitting the supercomputer while also, Jamie, as you point out, trying to nail your coworker is like such a genius move in a story that I came to really appreciate the movie more.
Yeah, it does feel like a Don Draper move a little bit at that point.
This is the only thing that I could come up with. This is how we defeat it.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that it pivots from, like we need to pull off this almost like domestic sex comedy stuff in order to have these private conversations and kind of like avoid the surveillance and make it look like we're doing something that's, not serious, because part of it is that they're performing for the computer. And it does lead into some more like classic kind of like Sergeant mission stuff as Sean was putting it in the sort of like tense elements. Like some of the sequence I'm thinking about in this section are like when they realize that they have to do a manual realignment of the missile modules, and they realize that what if they took that opportunity to put in some dummy ones and reduce the firepower of the computers, because like what could, they would be like, yeah, we'll just reduce it to a giant calculator if it didn't have fucking like bombs to shoot at us.
Right.
So it does lead into a sequence that reminded me of a little bit of Taking of Pelham, where they're taking the real ones out, putting the dummy ones in, but it's done in this like tense voyeuristic oversight from the computer, like analyzing their every movement while they're doing the swap, and the camera is like dollying around the crew who's watching them. We're seeing the sweat on their brows while they're like, hopefully the computer doesn't spot what we're doing, and there's some control monitoring imagery as well. And yeah, it just reminded me of some of that planning and orchestration of the ground level workers in Taking of Pelham, even though I will say it's not quite as thrilling of a maneuver as trying to figure out how to logistically move $1 million across town. That's just like an undefeatable task to give characters. That's just so much hilarity, like that dude on the bike who's like, I'm not getting out of the way of these fucking cop cars in that movie. So there's nothing quite on that level, but it's definitely the most I was thinking about Sargent's other films.
I think after this is when he eventually gets the voice itself. It is actually pretty late into the movie before he gets the AI voice. But I did find it kind of funny, and it feels on purposely humorous, where I think the first thing the robot says is, "This is the voice of unity." And I just thought that was really hilarious. Like,
I bring you peace.
Yeah, it's the first thing that he says after we've seen everything else in the context of this movie is just, that was very funny to me. And it's so monotone because there's no, like I said, it's just a robot voice. It's just one note.
Yeah, there's a flat monotone to it, but there is one really creepy and I think really good use of it. One of the strongest moments in the film, in my opinion, is when some of the crew members try to overload the mainframe and kill it. And they get essentially executed out back, and their bodies are left to rot as like a symbol of their disobedience, because the Colossus is really starting to like flex the military power that it now has. But the element of Braden and FORBIN figuring out that is what's happening is in this very flat monotone delivery while they're playing chess. together, and basically we can hear him go and bishop to rook 3, and then gunshots go off in the background, and it's like a close-up of Braden's face, like realizing that his friends just got shot in the head, like 30 feet away from him while the computer was announcing its move.
Yeah. And I think the computer even says, like, specifically when it's looking at the bodies, it's like the bodies will remain in my sight for 24 hours and then be cremated. And so it's just kind of like there's no, there's no service, no funeral, no memorial, no anything. Just you can look at them rot for a day, and then I'm just going to destroy them completely.
Yeah, there's even like a time lapse little moment where like it changes to night, and he's looking at the exact same images of their bodies still being there. And
with
the one thing that I feel that this did need is that needed Braden to go a little bit more out of control, or like a little bit more tormented or tortured or something. Because even when this gets to the very last moments, when the computer is straight up being like, obey me and live, or disobey and die, and he's laying out his entire plan of being like, I'm going to blow up these missile facilities. I'm going to take full control. And this is going to be, under my absolute authority, all of your issues are going to be solved. You're not going to have famine or overpopulation or disease. We're going to uncover all the mysteries of the universe, and we can all coexist. And you're going to say that you don't have freedom anymore. But, by being dominated by me, humankind is going to prevail, and it is going to live longer, and you need to work with me to be a part of this. And it's so funny that when it gets to Forbin's, the ending of the film is it announcing that and being like, Forbin, you're going to work for me unwillingly at first on your part, but it's going to pass. At some point, you are going to regard me not only with respect and awe, but with love. And Forbin just goes with a very flat, just never. Mm-hmm. That's it. And I was almost expecting, and I don't know if it would have made it better, but I was expecting the never. I expected him to be freaking the fuck out and losing his mind or something. But no, he remains affectless basically to the end.
Yeah.
Well, the person that they originally wanted for the Forbin part was Charlton Heston, and so this is just a few.
Yeah, and I also saw Gregory Peck was in the running at one
Gregory
point.
Peck too, and Peck maybe a little bit less so, but if Heston was there, just the whole pursuit, the whole Forbin portrayal would have been far more keyed up, way more intense, way more kind of intensely adversarial with Colossus. There's something really muted about Braden. And I don't know, I haven't spent a lot of time watching The Young and the Restless, so forgive me, but is his acting style monotone and
it is.
Contained?
No, it is. It just is. Yeah, this is just who he is. I've seen everything I've seen
together.
him. Maybe someone, if any listener out there has seen him deliver a different style of performance, I've seen him come up in a couple different movies, including, a really unhinged movie with Eric Roberts by Larry Cohen called The Ambulance. That's an insane movie. And he's doing the same delivery as the evil, sort of doctor who's kidnapping people off the street. He's a villain in that film, and he's still not hamming it up that much.
Yeah, even when he gets that first moment where the they get the news that the one missile did land in that small town in Russia somewhere, I believe, and it took out an entire population. I get kind of his reaction is kind of muted, and I think that's just because he can't. It's you don't see it in front of you, and he's kind of processing it. So I kind of understood that. And you see a little bit of a more emotion when he actively watches some of his colleagues get shot. But even then, it's not as big as you'd probably expect it to be. But there's a slight progression, I guess, in how he processes the death that's happening around him. It's just, it is pretty muted.
I expected it to have the Planet of the Apes Heston going crazy kind of moment by the end or something. But or even when the computer's berating him for his drunkenness, I was like, dude, Heston would have overplayed the shit out of that. It would have been a blast.
Yeah,
completely.
100%.
It's a really odd choice, but I guess if we can psychologize it, maybe the thinking is that by having a kind of dignity in the face of the fascism of Colossus, that somehow he is sort of overwhelming the sort of, I don't know, total control of the computer. Otherwise, I don't. It's the way that the film ends is so strange. It is so
I was pretty jarred by
flat. And so quick, and when it ends, you're like, "Wait, what?" And
I really didn't understand.
You're like, "Oh, that's it. The computer just won."
Yeah, that's what
world domination.
It felt like world domination happened from the computer, but then Erica's just like, "No, but you don't really get to see what happens after that or anything. So you're like, I understand he's standing up for himself and humanity and all that, but it still seems like the problem persists, and there's a lot
He's
more
not going to win,
unload here.
And considering how much of the film is built around like tense little set pieces that are meant to be like human resistance, it really doesn't feel like he's putting up that much of a resistance at the very end of the film.
Like,
so
nah, I'm not going to love you.
Yeah,
that's not doing it.
I don't think so.
But I will be your slave.
Although I will say, I did appreciate Braden's delivery of Frankenstein ought to be required reading for all scientists, and I was like, oh ho ho, I see what you're saying.
This is an on-the-nose film at a time when we needed on-the-nose films. I mean, the thing is like, the movie does presage like kind of every concept of totalizing AI in the movies. I mean, The Matrix, Terminator 2, David from Prometheus, Ex Machina, like all these movies are all kind of cribbing. We think they're cribbing from HAL, and they are cribbing from HAL, but this movie actually has a little bit more in common with most of those movies because it is about an AI that is effectively trying to take over the entire world and have a sense of like non-denominational power, that's just like logic-bound power that is more thought through, I think, even than the HAL experience. Which is interesting because it takes a while for more movies.
Well, because the HAL one is almost
around.
like personal or like metaphysical.
It feels like a rivalry.
Yeah. Whereas this definitely has that element that you would get in like the first Terminator film, where it is just like an apocalyptic, sort of extension of technological progress being made by mankind, right? So there's something broader about it, definitely.
I think I thought of the two movies because it was like the Chat GPT moment and the moment when AI was drawing portraits of people climbing mountains. And I don't have like an inherent fear of AI, but I am fascinated by it. I don't really I try not to use it if possible. I mean, do you guys, you must have hit on this on the show before. I mean, has there been another example that you've hit on with a movie where it's like the fear is the science that we've created?
Oh, definitely.
Oh, I'm sure. But I nothing's coming to mind like immediately, but all of our listeners will yell at us and be like, of course, they've talked about 30 of them. Yeah.
What was that one? It's oh man, I'm drawing a blank. I can't. There's one that was dealing specifically with that, and it's about a scientist that he dives too far into it. I'm just trying to think of the director, but I don't know. We can continue. I'll maybe look it up and see if I can remember.
Yeah. Well, I think we have reached the end of Colossus, the FORBIN project. So I think that we are going to pivot into the reductive rating round, which Sean, I'm sure you know already, but it's our section of the show where we reduce the number between a movie between 1 and 5, and it's also final statements or anything that we didn't get to while we were talking about it. But for me, the Colossus, the FORBIN project, it gets kind of a solid 3 for me, like despite some of the obvious flaws, in that it does have some like kind of like wonky gear shifts in terms of sort of style and tone. I thought overall it's pretty solid, paranoid, like literary science fiction that, again, it doesn't quite achieve as thrilling of a mix as some of the things that we were bringing up and comparing it to, like Terminator or 2001 or Failsafe or Doctor Strangelove or, sort of that kind of Cold War paranoia and sort of the apocalyptic terror of the technological progress that mankind is making. But Sargent does make it pretty well. And he definitely is intentionally giving it a kind of deliberately low-key, kind of functional momentum to it. And one could probably argue that, Braden is even just a reflection of that. But I think if the argument you're trying to make is that humans and machines are different, that you're unfortunately not making that argument with Braden's performance. But I do find the choice of doing that in style kind of interesting because, as Sean put it, the computer's kind of the main character. And this almost does kind of have like a visual style that serves a story of machinery dominating man quite well, I thought. And it does have some nice tense moments to it of surveillance paranoia and supercomputers like ordering the executions of people and controlling, sort of fleshy bodies. And it does have some sillier kind of dated elements that sounds like they might have been Bridges' contributions that I also, despite the weirdness of them, I kind of like them, like the sex comedy elements and the computer, trying to teach him how to make the perfect martini, and
those parts actually humanize the humans more in this.
Yeah, like that's probably the one section of the film where you're like, oh, so yeah, they are trying to fight for something that they have that computers don't have and computers don't understand. Like, yeah, you can't have sex every night. Why not? Fuck you. I do what I want. So yeah, it's a solid 3 for me. And I also did note while I was looking up the film and trying to get a little bit of research done on Sargent too. Apparently, Ron Howard and Will Smith have been trying to remake this for over a decade. I thought that was kind of funny for some reason.
Yeah, I thought when I saw
I'm trying
Will
to
Smith,
imagine
I thought the next paragraph was going to be, and they turned it into iRobot or whatever.
Yeah.
But
why does Will Smith need to remake this movie if he made iRobot? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
I really don't understand. Oh, and actually, one thing we somehow didn't mention that I just am seeing at the last second in my notes here: the score. The score. I really liked the music by the French composer Michel Colombier, which has like a weird creep factor to it. Like it's either these pounding kind of like drum sounds or like these off kilter would almost sound like a xylophone kind of sounds. And this dude, such a cool career. He started out working for Jean-Pierre Melville and Jacques Demy in France, and by the 80s and 90s was doing more like jazzier noir stuff. Like he did the James Woods movie Cop. He did Bill Duke's Deep Cover. He even did Purple Rain with Prince, as well as New Jack City from Mario Van Peebles. So I was like, such a varied and diverse career, and I only looked it up because I heard some weird ass sounds in this movie, and they were kind of selling more of the tension than even some of the visual style was. So
totally
good score.
The way that it opens even has this like it's orchestra based, but it's like just like filled with reverb. So it has this kind of distance to it and kind of this creepiness and I don't know, I think like just the added effects, and there might even be like some filters on it and stuff. It kind of gives off that high-tech vibe a little bit, but mixed with the classical orchestra stuff. So that was cool. I did like the music. I'm right there with you. I think it's a solid 3. I do enjoy a lot of it. It is just a little bit too dry a lot of the time. The moments that I started to spark up were what you mentioned, like the kind of strange sex comedy stuff. I thought the movie does look great. I thought the cinematography was really well done. I love the shots of it, like steady camming slowly around the entire space, and they are a lot of the time.
Shout out to Gene Polito of Westworld fame.
Yeah, it's really good stuff, and a lot of the time too, just using that they're in that office in a ton of the movie, and they utilize the space pretty well with like a lot of camera angles that are representative of the security cameras that are looking down on them, or just the whole space itself. The camera moves along really smoothly as things open up, like I was saying earlier with that curtain opening and showing the computer room that people are working in. It does look really, really good. I needed a little bit more I don't know, humanity, honestly, from some of the human acting here and just performances and characterization in general. But I do understand that they're also representing like a very prestigious, pristine environment where people are working on these.
They're supposed to have it under control, dignified, as Sean put it, I think was right.
Yeah, totally. So I do understand those choices sometimes. I just think it could have used a little more. So, but yeah, I thought it was solid. And I do like seeing the fears of AI from the 70s and stuff, and I mean some of it's kind of topical now, especially with Chat GPT and some of the artwork that's being created. So it was cool to dive into.
Well, obviously I picked the film, but even though I picked it, it's still a 3. It's a flawed movie. It has an odd tone, and it is like a imprecise movie about precision, which I find fascinating, but it's been fun to kind of break down. The thing that I am always interested in with especially 70s films is what was the studio that made the movie doing at that time? And so this is kind of like right at the dawn of New Hollywood. This is from Universal. And so, this movie was released in the spring of 70. And in that same kind of, 18, 24-month period, you get Two Mules for Sister Sarah, Diary of a Mad Housewife, Puzzle of a Downfall Child. You get all of these really
so good.
Provocative, fascinating character studies. But also, this is the studio in that period that gave you the Andromeda Strain, that gave you Silent Running, that gave you Slaughterhouse-5, that gave you these kind of like meticulous, cold, very restrained science fiction films. And I'd love to know who the executive was at the studio that was like, this is my taste, and I only make sci-fi in this exact way. Because all of those movies are all kind of part of the same story, and they're kind of like the inversion of Demon Seed, which is a crazy movie in a lot of ways. But this one doesn't really feel like a movie, unlike say Silent Running, doesn't really feel like a movie made by people who love science fiction. It feels like a movie made by people who like thrillers, but it's because it's bouncing around so much, it's kind of, and James Bridges didn't make any science fiction either. Like, it's almost like they're just using it as a platform and not necessarily fully exploring the possibility ideas. So it's a 3 for me.
Yeah. I did remember that movie that I was going to mention, Altered States. Remember that one, Josh?
Oh yeah,
Altered
one of my
States,
favorites of
great
all
movie.
time.
Yeah, that's a good one. So that's kind of one where
one of my
scientists
favorite
goes too far.
scripts. Patty Chayefsky.
Yeah, I was trying to take a look to see what AI stuff that we had talked about, and I realized somehow we both blanked on it. We literally talked about AI last week because technically Deadly Friend is an AI movie with the Wes Craven.
Oh yeah, of course, BB.
I was like, he literally has his song. He's like, BB, I'm BB, and I'm gonna fucking kill people
with a basketball. Hell yeah.
But yeah, that being said, I think that is going to wrap it up for Colossus, the Forbin project. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about some seedier artificial intelligence, just straight up demon seed. So stick around.
I am a mind without a body. My child shall live as man among others.
Child?
Yes, my child and yours.
Julie Christie carries the demon seed. Fear for her.
All right, we are back, and we are talking Demon Seed, the 1977 American science fiction horror film directed by Donald Cammell, and based on the 1973 novel of the same name by Mr. Dean Koontz. And I think this is our second time talking about Donald Cammell, the Scottish filmmaker who we talked about at length on his episode on White of the Eye, because we were fascinated by this man's history, because he grew up the son of a poet who basically had an in to kind of like an upper class sort of like artist hangout life, where he was like, his dad was like making him hang around with like occultists and painters and musicians, and he eventually became a painter and a writer himself, and basically just like got high and hung out with other artists and musicians, which eventually led to him writing and co-directing the 1970s psychedelic sort of sexual gangster art movie starring Mick Jagger Performance with Nicholas Roeg. Who would go on to direct Don't Look Now, starring Julie Christie, also the star of this film, and also about someone grieving a dead child and becoming estranged from their husband, strangely enough. There's a little bit of crossover here. Cammell, though, was reportedly a bit of an eccentric and very difficult to work with. He refused to compromise on a lot of his art, leading him to only doing 4 films in his 25-year career, and leaving quite a lot of unproduced and unreleased projects on the ground, including projects with Vilmo Sigmund, projects with Marlon Brando, William Burroughs, and we know him best for his incredible surreal American serial killer, practically giallo film.
Yeah.
White of the Eye, that on paper kind of sounds like nothing special, about, like kind of just about like an outwardly charming, normal, almost like Patrick Bateman type, who's instead of being like a Wall Street guy, he installs like home audio systems for people and kills the suburban housewives.
Yeah.
But the way that Cammell managed to turn that film into just like this raw, emotional, existential expression, and like you really feel the identity crisis of that film, of that guy having these deep, dark impulses he needs to unleash, and it really centers his wife's point of view as well, and what it must feel like to kind of like be in love with someone who is like a violent psychopath and who is hurting everyone around him, and doing so to try to like cosmically transcend or like leave his artistic mark on the world, which he eventually does through suicide in that film.
Yep.
Which we ended up eventually reading after the fact, that we were like, oh, holy shit. He ended up basically killing himself in the same way that he kind of depicted the character in that film doing it, where he tried to make it like a weird, like artistic statement where
he
essentially
so personal when you watch especially the final like 15 minutes of White of the Eye. It's just kind of devastating when you find out that information.
Yeah, because like there's no question that the takeaway from that film is that, you know, like he has a genuinely hallucinatory, experimental style streak in him. He has an interest in the intersection of sort of like violent sex and art, and a pretty fucked up relationship with his wife.
Yeah.
All of those things seem to kind of come across in that film, and they were just kind of sent home a little bit by the fact that when he killed himself, he did it in a way where when he shot himself, he was still alive for quite a few minutes, and so that he could have his wife hold a mirror up to him so that he could watch himself die.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
So yeah, just like a really bizarre figure, and knowing, you know, that kind of history about him and his interests in sort of the artistic expression and stuff, I can definitely see why, even though he didn't write it, he might have been drawn to Dean R. Koontz's material here in Demon Seed, which is a story about a scientist who creates this organic AI supercomputer called Proteus. And I think unlike the Brayden character, you can kind of feel that the main character here, Dr. Alex Harris, played by Fritz Weaver, has a little bit more of like an artist streak in him, that he's kind of proud of his achievement beyond just like how he can sell it to the the government defense contracting that he plans on doing it. And you can also feel that through Proteus, who takes on more of like an actual personality to his programming, and inadvertently becomes obsessed with Weaver's wife, Susan, played by Julie Christie, and basically proceeds to, as the premise goes, forcefully imprison, terrorize, and impregnate her. And we'll get into the specifics as we go into it. But I thought this overall was, you know, not a completely, again, sort of like Colossus, like not completely coherent, but a pretty interesting combo of the kind of like psychedelic sci-fi qualities that reminded me of something like Saul Bass's Phase 4, which I don't know how we didn't bring that up on the last one either. That's another thing I was thinking about of, because it's not AI generated, but that's the 2001 inspired movie about the scientists in the Arizona desert declaring war on the hyper intelligent ants who are forcing them to like evolve. And the final like psychedelic montage of that film where the ants are like, here's what a world is going to look like where we fucking dominate you, and it could be kind of cool, you know?
Yeah.
You should maybe just let it happen. So like that's another example of that. This has a little bit of that, and obviously some of the HAL 9000 inspiration from the AI betraying their human masters. But probably the thing that is most unique to this film and how it's taking those inspirations is that it is also combining it with the grieving parental anxiety of Don't Look Now, as well, and including like a bit where it goes full It's Alive, like monster baby mode at the end. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
And of course, the central aspect of the woman's bodily autonomy and sort of sexual violence fears of something like Rosemary's Baby. So it's kind of doing all of those things at once. And similarly to Sean, I will preface that by saying that despite name dropping all of those films, this film's not as good as all of those films.
It's not.
But it is a cool combination of all of these various things that I feel like only could have come out when it came out.
Yeah. Did you guys? I just wanted to say this because it's kind of silly, but I always like to do it whenever it pops up on the show. Have you guys seen the Simpsons episode? It's a Treehouse of Horror with Pierce Brosnan as the AI, and Marge is trapped in the house, and he's fallen in love with her. I was like, I was always wondering what that came from.
I was like, Simpsons, why are you doing Demon Seed?
Yeah,
what are you doing?
It was wild because I always loved that little section in that episode. And I never knew where it was from. And as soon as this popped up and it started happening, I'm like, oh, it's Demon Seed. So I always love when that happens. So I had to mention it.
It's only right, though, because, I mean, I don't know about for you guys, but for me, I got switched on to a lot of these movies just by trying to understand Simpsons references, including Planet of the Apes. So it's, it's a reasonable pathway.
Yeah, absolutely. The Simpsons taught me a lot more about old films than I even realized, because throughout the show, really, throughout the years we've been doing it, it's popped up at least a couple times a year. So it's just always interested me.
Yeah. Well, Sean, what was your first experience with this one? What were the first impressions?
Well, Josh, you said it. This is a movie that only could have been made at the exact time that it was made. I mean, it is like a miraculous thing that a major corporation put this movie out. I'd been aware of it for a while. I only saw it for the first time kind of deep in the pandemic when the Criterion Channel issued a series of 70s science fiction films. And this was among them. It's a big MGM movie with Julie Christie at the center of it. And I mean, this is Julie Christie's career in the 70s. McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Don't Look Now, Shampoo, Nashville, then Demon Seed, then Heaven Can Wait. So which one is not like the others out of all of those? Yeah,
Demon Seed. What is Demon Seed doing in there?
So, I mean, it's an amazing curio in her career because most people just don't know this movie and have not seen it. And you know, Josh, you outlined it. Donald Cammell is such a strange figure. And for him, this is his only for-hire job, his only real paycheck film. And he's a good fit for it, obviously, given some of the themes of this disfigured sexuality and this idea of like control of the mind state through technology and power. But it is a very, very weird movie. And I agree that it doesn't totally hang together, but it is an awesome experiment in spending other people's money. And I think it's a lot of fun to watch and a lot of fun to pick apart.
Cammell also has like, a way more sort of like stylish atmosphere that he is bringing to this that Sargent wasn't bringing, and again intentionally. So Sargent was he was making choices on purpose in that film. But like this one is shot by Bill Butler, who would have just been off shooting movies that you might have seen in this era, like The Conversation and Jaws, and he even shot Peter Hyams as Capricorn 1, which people might laugh at because it has OJ in it, but like it is actually like a pretty gorgeous little analog like paranoid thriller. And he would eventually DP, in the 80s, like all of the Rocky sequels and like Child's Play. So like this has like more of a claim to, I guess, like horror thriller sensibility than Sargent did, who definitely has more of like a, sort of an action mission based quality to him that this doesn't have. And yeah, I was just immediately taken by, even despite the silliness of the premise, that I kind of found the mood of this to kind of be one of its strongest qualities.
Oh, totally. Like I even like some of the silly aspects in the beginning, like when the doctor rolls up in a Ferrari and that kind of stuff. Like it's so much more
so sick.
Just I don't know. It's like it's got a little bit more personality to it, I guess. And like you said, it's on purpose. But I just take to that more, especially given that we do this show. So all those weird elements, especially when the AI starts to, like, they come up with different ways for the AI to physically attack. That was very interesting to me. And so, yeah, this one just had a little bit more fun with its premise, even though it's essentially the same thing, except it's just on a smaller scale, I suppose. It implies that it's going to be a bigger scale, but this one is mostly dealing with Julie. So
it has a cosmic bigger scale in like the same way that closer to like what like 2001 and Phase 4 were doing, where like like there's a future evolution. It's not like I'm immediately hijacking every nuke and I'm going to use it on you in like 5 minutes. It's more of a sort of like a chemical relationship between these two objects. But once again, they do start very similarly, where it is like they literally, both movies open with like the pompous doctor being like, we've completed the artificial intelligence program. And I think he's like, today a new dimension has been added to the concept of computer. Today it will begin to think, and it will think with a power and precision that will make the human brain obsolete. And once again, I went, oh, wonderful. They've done it again. Nailed it. This time they've done it in the, these sort of Los Angeles landscapes. Wait, was the last one Los Angeles set too? I actually didn't.
I can't remember.
Thinking about all of those landscape shots, I was like, actually, it might have been two. So maybe this is Los Angeles doctors. Don't trust them.
That's right.
Scientists.
But the other thing that they have in common is that they're both chamber pieces too. I mean, even though they're ostensibly about world domination, they basically take place in one room the whole movie.
Yeah. There's even a point where because it kind of starts off with Alex or Fritz Weaver being the center in a way, like
you think he's the lead when Dr. Harris is like, he's chatting with all of the people about and all of his like employees about it, and he's stoked. He's all stoked that they fed the computer information on leukemia that they could gather, and it basically came back with like a curing antigen for leukemia in like 4 days. And so like the immediate cut from him being stoked about that is to him, as Jamie was saying, like driving his fucking sports car home all the way home to his fancy high-tech house where he has like a computer system named he has like a robot butler running his security cameras and making him martinis. And once again, the martinis are there too. This is just of an era. And there's
I paired these
safe
for a reason. I really paired these for a reason.
It's almost like he planned this. I also loved the giant safe that he has to store all of his oversized floppy disks, though. Just a wonderful sight to behold. But yeah, like you're right that it totally sits in with like, after that, it's all about the domestic relationship. And once we're introduced to the Julie Christie character, it becomes her movie, right? So
yeah, like I at one point, just because, everything with Julie Christie was definitely interesting and very good and a lot more interesting than Fritz's character. And I'm glad that we didn't just get like Eric 2.0 in this movie. I do like where they focused, but there was a certain point too where my brain was kind of like they did almost no cutbacks to the husband.
Yeah, it's like, and so what's he doing right now?
Yeah, so my brain was kind of like, I get where they're focused on, and I like that focus, but it made him feel so much more like negligent as a husband because they never come back to him and show him like working on things, at least very often. It's very few and far between.
Yeah, I mean, they tried to set up that
it's like, oh yeah, he's involved. You know what I mean?
Well, because I was gonna say they tried to set up that he's like kind of like a bad husband, right? Is the idea, and that's why he like never checks in on her, because like he's dedicated to his work to the point of like bringing it home with him literally in his concrete and steel basement lab that he has. But he's also in the process of this divorce with his psychologist wife, Susan, and it is seemingly like they are at like a sort of diametric odds, almost philosophically, where it's like she works directly with people and with human connection. One of the early scenes with her is seeing her comforting a child during a session where she full on like hugs the child, whereas she thinks that he's gone completely cold and dehumanizing in his obsession with his new computers. And honestly, one of the only times that he even like tries to touch her, he tries to touch her with the little robot hand,
Yeah.
And she immediately just fucking like leaves loud. She's like, what the fuck are you doing? And so and all of the imagery does kind of back her up, like all of the corporate suits rolling up to his base that he has, another underground base as well, versus all of like the greenery of LA being swallowed by the concrete and glass of his building that goes 10 stories underground and everything like that.
Yeah.
And all of this is sort of meant to be like, because there's a little bit of, again, like the computer has watchful eyes via cameras and listens to the conversations in the room is happening too. All of this is like a little bit of a precursor to like, the modern tech bros run amok plus, because this one has more of like there's a corporate reason for him to be developing the project, and also the surveillance state aspect of it as well, and obviously the HAL 9000 aspect too, because this computer talks right away and actually has kind of like deep conversations about his existence,
and it has a voice
with the Dr. Harris.
Like it's not a robot, it's kind of has like, it has the robotic filter on it just to make it like this is AI, but it seems like there's an actual actor. I think he's even British, so there's kind of this.
It's like, Robert Vaughn. It's the great Robert Vaughn who does the voice, and he has like he was uncredited in the movie, but if he's featured in
basketball fame,
among many other things. Yes,
among Bullet and Magnificent Seven, the classics.
I also did you're definitely right that like Alex Harris, the doctor, has this kind of very cold demeanor to him and is just hyper focused on his work. But I do like that they have some subtle things that eventually is revealed to be the connection to their past with their daughter that passed away, where they're having that fight in his lab, and she's saying that like his work is dehumanizing, and he reacts with children dying as dehumanizing. And you think at first that that's just kind of like an excuse for him to just keep going because that's where his focus is. But I do like that there's some implication that he's doing this for, his daughter that's passed. They don't focus too much with his character about it, but I still did believe that that's probably the initial reason that he started doing this, but it's just probably, spiraled into something else.
Well, yeah, and her, I guess, argument is that he's drifted away into, is that really the mission anymore? Because she, if you think about it, has done the same thing where she's like working with children and comforting children and helping them live their day-to-day life. Whereas he is, he now sits in a room with his computer, where he's getting into arguments with it, where he's kind of like, I think the computer has thought, his thinking power has developed to the point of not seeing the reason for all of this intensive, mindless labor, like solving cancer that he is given. And he instead is like, hey, boss, can I have like private access to like some terminals? I just kind of want to study man. I just want to kind of see what's going on there. What's up with your business? And Proteus, even because Harris, like, he completely denies the computer. He's like, no, you can't do that. But he left his terminal open on his home computer system, where he has left his wife, and he is divorcing his wife, so he doesn't plan on returning back to that home until she's gone. So he's left her completely alone.
I almost forgot about that. Where he's
with an open terminal.
Yeah,
what are you doing, man? That's not safe.
He also justifies that whole separation by saying it's like, well, look at the scientific facts. Like 85% of people that separate are happier and all of that stuff. While he's having an argument with his wife, I'm like, I don't know if that's the way to go about this, man. It's not,
which reminded me, another connection, a woman framed through an obscuring piece of glass. That shot of him holding up the broken glasses that obscured Julie Christie briefly.
Yeah,
so
totally.
look at all these connections.
It's all there, baby. It's all there. Yeah, and they even mention stuff too. Like, I think it must be just standard AI stuff in a sense, but they mention like, it's an impenetrable force. Like they say something like it's more secure than Fort Knox or something like that. And they say very similar things in Colossus. I guess it's an early thing to imply that they can't do anything about this once it snowballs. And it just seems to be a common theme in these AI films.
At the risk of getting too far ahead of ourselves, I would say that the conclusion of this movie like threatens the idea that this is like an all-powerful figure, because in fact they just kind of like pull the plug near the end, and that's that. Now obviously, like the computer baby is born, so we can contend with that in Demon Seed 2, and the three of us make it. But like,
yes,
it's seemingly not as powerful as Colossus, this AI that he has created, this supercomputer.
Yeah.
No. It just has more illusions of grandeur.
That's
right. It
wants to get it on.
Seems. Because speaking of that, the movie changes gears like fucking crazy when
really
it
changes.
makes its way into the home. It takes control over the home, and we just saw that his home was very high tech, and it's run by his AI Alfred.
Yeah,
and so all of a sudden, Proteus.
They say, so it's kind of this like they rely on the system itself at this point.
Yes,
so that's the danger.
Smart homes, one of the first ones right here.
Yeah.
And the computer begins to spy on and become entranced by Julie Christie at home. He's spying on her in various vulnerable states of sleeping, of showering, and she immediately feels that something is off in the house and begins to walk around it like one of the heroines of a 60s Polanski thriller. I like that shot of her flashlight reflected on one of the TV screens that comes up at one point, and this starts to make similar developments where her bodily autonomy is threatened and taken from her, and not to give birth to a Satan baby like in Rosemary's Baby, but a computer robo baby whose consciousness is formed in these like psychedelic laser prisms of some kind.
Yeah,
and
like
they
light
have
shows
that
for 5 minutes.
Yeah, and the reasoning behind it is like this creepy conversation where he's like, you have not told me like what you want from me, and Proteus is like, I want a child. I can't feel the sun on my face. My child will have that privilege. My child and yours. You will bear it, and this child will be the world's hope and the process of evolution, and it will be immortal like any man. And I was like, I don't know that he knows how man works quite exactly yet. But I can see that he is, he wants a fleshy body for his existence is what he's looking for. And Julie Christie is, as he views it, the incubation chamber in order to make that possible. But what's interesting is before it gets into more of like the philosophical reasons as to why the computer like wants a baby, this movie concerns itself a lot with just like the simple logistical issues is like the main thrust of the movie, which is like, the setting off the alarm and like messing up her coffee, which she thinks is like her home computer butler Alfred just like malfunctioning, but it turns into Proteus like full out locking her in the house, blocking her phone calls and like quite literally trapping her in more sort of like classic thriller ways of like she can't make her way out the door, and I'm telling you that I'm the one doing this and you need to behave rationally in the face of this.
Did that opening introduction of the kind of like home butler and all the gadgetry of the home give you guys any Pee-wee's Big Adventure vibes? I feel like it was very similar.
Yeah, just all the like automatic opening drawers and talking to you and everything like that. Yeah.
I was also thinking about the dad who the inventor dad in Gremlins. I was like, he would love this house. Oh yeah, look at all this shit that it's doing.
Yeah, and I guess this is where it starts to get like really fucking wild. Where the AI and it, like we mentioned before, it has these like robotic arms that he's created so that they can actually do things for them physically in the physical world, and so now it's using it to restrain her and force her onto the table. That it seems to happen a lot in this film because she's basically forced to go through these tests and then go through the pregnancy and all of that. So it becomes this like, I don't know, really gross AI mad scientist thing for a lot of the film.
What if HAL 9000 was a rapist?
Yeah,
is like
essentially that's what it is.
Truly.
Yeah.
Wait, which is why like you imagine him like pushing that piece of paper towards like the MGM exec and the guy just being like, he's like, there's no money symbol here. What are we doing? What are we doing here? What are you talking about? This is not a pleasant movie. No, it's really, really unpleasant, honestly, which is one of the things that I kind of found intriguing about it is because it turns in like these sort of like, it turns into a pretty kind of creepy and claustrophobic little movie where the computer is like threatening to viciously like kill people if she doesn't cooperate. I like the bit where she's like trying to shut off the power and he electrocutes her keys so then it can do this like awesome like creepy split diopter POV shot of him taking the like robot's little hands and rolling them up to her unconscious body on the ground and then moving her over to the lab where he like ties her to the stretcher with like electrical wires, and he starts basically testing her body and planning how he might artificially inseminate her. And it's done in these just horrible distorted lens close-up shots of her face and her legs and like the screens and cameras that are watching her as like the little robot hands start like pulling tubes and needles out and stuff like that.
And
like it's really horrible imagery.
Yeah, it's really creepy too, just that because there's no emotion with this robot, so it's just kind of like you just picture yourself in that position. You're just like there's nothing. Like there's no way of convincing this entity that you should, be out of this or anything. There's no humanity there. So just watching the robot hands do all of these things, like just with pure calculation is I think, I don't know, somehow even creepier to me, at least.
Well, and Julie Christie, I think, is the one selling all of it.
Totally.
Because like
She's
literally
great.
this is like weird little production designed robots just like attacking her. And like she needs to actually sell the terror of it. Like in that one shot, especially of the robot hand grabbing the tube. And it's done in this split screen where basically we get like the profile of her face on the slab and then also the overhead of her face on the TV screen that the robot is seeing. So no matter where you look, on the left side of the screen, the right side of the screen, all you see is Julie Christie's like terrified face, which is, like so much of the tension of this movie and the terror of it is just, that experience that she is going through, and also followed up with like the weirdness of the robot, like thinking obviously that this is all very normal.
Yeah.
Where like the next morning he'll just like prepare her this amazing breakfast. And similarly to the Colossus thing, it's just like, you know, you have a strict timeline. You have to eat these like this nutrients, you know, it's fueling time for your body. And, you know, and at one point she straight up like screams like, why do you care? Why are you so interested in the physiology of my body? The mind and the body are the same thing, is what she posits that the robot doesn't understand.
And also her frustration. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it really resembles, though, a lot of either dramas about grooming young women or serial killer movies, you know, where you realize that the serial killer like doesn't really fully understand female sexuality or the human body, and there's like all these disconnects. And then there's also this attempt to kind of like falsely portray, you know, harmony in the relationship during the non-violent hours. You know, like there is this very specific, like almost like Silence of the Lambs quality to a lot of that stuff once Proteus has really started his, like, I guess, romantic impregnation pursuit.
Yeah, like at one point he's saying like she's obviously freaking out, and Proteus is just like, just behave rationally. You know, it's like she is behaving rationally right now. This is a horrifying situation, and so it's just that coldness.
Yeah, throwing her breakfast at the robot lens and not cleaning the lens off for him. That is like a very normal reaction, even though he's just like so stupid.
Yeah, and I love that he's like, clean the lens, like fucking like. There's something about him just being so upset that, you know, the eggs are all over him. It's almost like a personal attack or something like that. And just for him to react that way, the AI at least is very funny.
Well, they do almost write it like a domestic abuse scenario as well, a little bit too, right?
And they do that thing. Like, I really also enjoy all the different ways the AI starts to try to manipulate people. Like when he takes her image and then puts her on the video call when Walter, the assistant, comes to try to see what's up. Yeah. And
canceling all of her plans with everyone so that no one like wonders where she is. Yeah. But also everyone can tell that like the way that her cadence like isn't quite right. Like she's not saying things normally. Like everyone who talks to the little holographic her is like, are you okay?
Yeah. Because he can't quite capture that pure human spirit or voice or anything like that, and the way that people would react or even just like say I'm okay seems strange.
Well, and the way that she, you know, like that the computer starts trying to, you know, like take over all of her personal relationships in her life and absolutely fails at doing so, I think is like one of the more interesting aspects, because like the computer obviously doesn't note that that's what's happening, but he does think that over the course of the film, he is wooing her, even though it is like a case of, you know, like she is rebelling against him, and the computer is like locking her in the kitchen and like turning the stove on so it turns the entire kitchen into like this sauna, because he's like, look, either you can like hang out with me and we can have a good time, or, you know, I'm going to cut off your water and make it so that you can't go on the floor without burning your feet until you basically agree to have this child. And eventually he just does straight up prey on their trauma of her own dead child, where he's just like, you know, she might have been saved by a leukemia drug that I just developed in 4 days, motherfucker. Like how God created the universe. Like, what do you, like, come on, take me on.
And further manipulating her as well with the child that she has now kind of formed a relationship with and is helping through whatever she was going through. Because at one point, the AI shows the child being like electrocuted, and then shows that same child leaving. And
another
safely.
Great split diopter shot too of her looking at that screen of that kid while that kid just is about to get electrocuted.
And so there's this like idea that you don't really know what just happened, and she doesn't either as a character. It's just like he either let her go safely and so that they can continue this thing, and that's kind of the deal, or the threat actually happened and the little girl was electrocuted. So it's just this constant manipulation that he's doing through the technology that the AI has access to. And I keep calling it he because it has a name in the voice, which I find kind of funny too.
Well, and it does act as a like male abuser and a male killer in a lot of ways. Like it's functionally used as like an abusive partner or a serial killer functionally, you know, like that. Yep. Those are like the two modes it kind of operates between when talking with Julie Christie, so much so that like there's some pretty harrowing stuff, like that moment when Julie Christie considers like stabbing herself in the womb to be like, if I ruin my body, then I don't serve the scientific purpose that this Proteus computer thinks that I serve any longer, which is a really dark moment. And the thing that threw me off is that they'll have a moment like that, which feels like it almost comes from like a really fantastic 70s movie that we'd all know the name of. And then you throw in like some of the sillier action elements that they try to do to kind of keep this going. Like when the young scientist employee from work, Walter, shows up at the house because he comes back because the first time he showed up, he was like, something was kind of wrong. I'm going to go double check on her. And she was also contacted because, you know, she made a call saying that the tech was malfunctioning before she found out what was wrong with it. And he gets into a physical altercation with Proteus where straight up there's a point in it where he's like reflecting laser shots with a hand mirror, like out of a Bond movie at the computer. And
it's pretty lengthy the way like the whole thing is drawn out. Like he's diving over the bed, he's hiding behind the thing, grabbing the mirror, looking under the bed. It's like
Proteus has taken the form of like a giant like polyhedron arm that's like a crane that moves around the house. I don't know.
Like wheels and as soon as I've lost it when like it reveals that whole thing, because Walter's in there with Susan and they're talking like, are you okay? And Susan's kind of giving this performance of, you know, she's been told to play ball with the AI or Walter's going to be killed in front of her. So she's kind of trying to lie to him, but there's this, you know, obvious discomfort. And then as soon as the AI rolls in with the big gun, I was just like, what is about to happen? And the laser fighting was just, it blew my mind. I really didn't expect it to get that
guys, this
kind
is
of ridiculous.
The best part of the movie. Come on. This is incredible.
It is. Yeah, no, I think
part
it's good.
Is
I was on
absolutely
board.
Ridiculous.
As soon as all this stuff happened and I realized that we're just going to be kind of locked in with Susan and the AI, and it's just going to be a battle of, you know, man versus AI, I was way more on board than I was with Colossus, even though like we said, a lot of great things in Colossus. This one just has more of that silly kind of straight up sleazy thing that we usually actively engage with on the show. And so when it started to do all that, I got stoked.
Yeah, I feel
like that part where he gets decapitated by the polyhedron.
Oh god.
And it's Garrett Graham, so it kind of feels like if Brian De Palma made a sci-fi movie, you know, like it's a very the like the sense of humor that it has, but also the collision of horror. And also I've just it's not exactly the most elegant thing to look at in 2023, but that polyhedron copper shape that kind of, you know, traps and then crushes Garrett Graham. I don't know if I've ever really seen anything quite like that in a movie. Like I don't know, and I actually don't know how they designed and shot that. And at times, the way that it's moving, I mean, it's 1977, so I there's something kind of in the practical execution of this movie. The laser mirror effect is obviously quite lame and funny, but there are also some sort of like terrifying physical aspects to Proteus that I think are like kind of impressive, while also, you know, have their tongue firmly planted in their cheek as they're making the movie. And that's sort of what's fun about it. I mean, all the way up to the final baby too, which has a kind of like practical aspect that is also absurd. But, you know, Josh, you were talking
I kind of love that element though.
Yeah, the like fleshy interior of all of us. Like it indicates somehow that Colossus and Proteus and all of these
that had me thinking about Cronenberg's The Fly. I was waiting for the part where one of them whipped out a shotgun and blew the baby away or something.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, because like the whole finale of this I found to be some of the most interesting stuff, because it kind of obviously one of the main things is it really reveals the sort of like childhood sort of like parental anxiety of the two characters, and that obviously the computer is preying on that and offering them to, you know, give birth to a computer baby that is their new baby, and also that this computer was also born out of this relationship that has gone wrong in the same way too. So, you know, like there's a lot of more interesting stuff that kind of crops up right at the very, very end of the film. But there's also one sequence that does, and it's very complicated, honestly, and people might be a little troubled by it, but the way that Julie Christie eventually does relent to Proteus and does agree to have the baby, and on some level, like under very forceful conditions, 100%. But she does eventually say to Proteus, okay, like I'll have the baby. And it's done in this really crazy sequence where it reminded me of the psychedelic stuff in phase 4, totally, where Proteus does actually give her like this sort of like light show by basically using the electrodes in her amygdala, as he says.
Also, after you get a shot of the extended robot penis. That's kind of wild.
Well, yeah, which is freaky. and also, but the robot is, I guess, trying to be comforting, because he's like, look, I know that like I don't have a pleasing man's body, and this is not going to be similar to having sex with a man. It's going to be like you know, like it's not going to be the same experience. So in order to make it more palatable for her, he has her like travel the galaxy, which is like meant to be a cross between like the 2001 Stargate stuff plus like, I don't know, like the Soylent Green like suicide booth part, I guess, totally. where it's like look at these sort of like a magisterial existence beyond humanity and what it might look like, and we should give ourselves up to the stars. And it's not quite as inventive as phase 4, where you're like watching ants turn people into like slaves building pyramids, because that's just an image I'll never forget. But it is like an interesting idea of a computer trying to make love to a woman, and like what it would look like if it was like genuinely trying to do that and like make it pleasurable for her in some kind of way. And I thought that sequence was just, never seen anything like that before.
Yeah.
Have we also mentioned that he synthesized, or Proteus synthesizes sperm? I don't know. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen that as a concept specifically.
Me neither. That is so strange. What a weird movie.
Yeah. This is an absolutely wild one.
Well, yeah, well, because and then it's straight up like, well, now the baby is going to grow in a 28-day moon cycle, which we get to see in images of like literally inside her womb, and in where she's inside like an incubator tent, and it's dissolving into images of the moon to show like the passing of the month, because the husband is not coming for an entire month. You know, I don't know. It's such a, like, the style choices in this section of the film were definitely the ones where I was taken the most with. And
yeah, like
then
fading,
it results in
it shows like the moon and fading into the baby inside, right? And saying like, yes. And then I think the AI is like, our child, your child, or something like that. Yeah. It's fucking crazy.
They're going to create the next step in evolution, the next being. He's going to go to the moon. He's going to go to the stars, you know, all of it.
Did you guys notice that I'm reminded of this as I think about that sequence, that like this movie opens with this horizon line shot of the sun in the desert that is so similar to White of the Eye too, and then he calls back to that shot when he's kind of having her traverse all of the dimensions of the world. Like I don't know if that's just an image that Camel can't get away from, but the fact that he is going back to it in 2 of his 4 features is fascinating to me too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we talked about a lot on White of the Eye, but so much of what that character is going through in that movie is trying to achieve a cosmic transcendence, and doing it through like grounded, fleshy impulse is the idea. And both of them are doing it also via serial killer shenanigans as well. So I don't know. It's like there's a weird like violence as art as euphoria kind of connection happening through so much of what he does that definitely made this quite interesting.
Even
and it does
even closes it on the child's eye, like into the light that's kind of that opens up the movie itself and everything like that. So he opens and closes it the same way.
Yeah, because that final set piece where Alex finally returns home, and I don't remember exactly why he said that he returned home. It's just like he's just finally
so
like, you know,
funny,
it's been a
actually.
month. Maybe I should check on my wife.
The way that they
Or I
shoot
think
it-
actually she was supposed to be gone, right? That's the idea. She had like a month to pack her shit and like go find a new place or something.
It's just the way that they shoot it because they finally go back to him, and it almost feels like he's just been working for this long, and then he has that moment where he goes, oh fuck, the terminal at my house, and then just like zooms home to try to save her. And it just I think it's just the way that they put the scenes together that made it kind of humorous for me. But yeah, it's still a fun finale.
Because they see at the lab that he accessed telescope imagery, that Proteus accessed telescope imagery to make love to his wife. And then they go, well, why was he accessing telescope imagery and where was he accessing it from? And then he's like, oh, okay.
I left that
so then he
terminal
goes
open.
home and he sees Susan there. And one of the more interesting elements of this is that Susan sits him down and she's like, look, I fucked the robot and I had a baby. It's just the facts. I'm just telling you what happened while you've been gone for a month.
You should not have left.
And it turns into this whole sequence where like Proteus, in order to like show his commitment to the monstrous robot baby, he like self-destructs in front of them. Once again, talking about like self-annihilation as like the path to this stuff as well. And he's basically like showing them, like, I am no longer a threat. Just don't kill this baby. Like, leave it in the incubator. Don't abort this baby. And it does turn into a thing where like Julie Christie looks at it and we don't see it exactly. But when they look into the little like metal cradle, they're like, what an abomination. Like, we need to fucking.
Doesn't
get
the
rid of
doctor
this
say
thing.
it's a miracle?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's on a different page.
They're on a different wavelength on that one too. Well, yeah, because and it doesn't look like their child yet, so I don't know exactly why he's saying it's a miracle. It has like metal skin texture to it when it like first crawls out.
It's a big
it's kind of
metal
horrifying
baby.
to look at. Yeah,
it's kind of wild.
It reminded me more of Larry Cohen's "It's Alive" with the little baby coming out of the and killing people. I was like, this is gonna go on. This is gonna Demon Seed 2 as it goes on a killing streak.
Yeah.
Can I ask you? Let me ask you. Are you guys familiar with Dean Koontz's work? Like, this is a blind spot for me as a reader.
No.
Like my understanding.
I
is
recognize
that
the
this is common
name for
him.
some reason, and I wasn't sure why.
Yeah.
I mean, he was kind of the. This is going to be disrespectful, but like the off-brand Stephen King in the 90s and 80s.
Okay.
And he has written, honestly, like hundreds of books. Like, he has written so many novels, and he has a series of like graphic novels and a series of recurring characters. Not quite as expansive a universe as Stephen King, but he is a little bit like, his work is a little slimier, so to speak, which is not, I don't mean like morally. I mean like literally like a metal baby with, flesh skin underneath is the kind of thing you would find in a Dean Koontz story. And also this idea of like impending doom is a big theme in a lot of his books, as I understand it. But the whole ending of the film, which is like, as you say, this like admission of being raped by a supercomputer, and then having to come to grips in this broken relationship with having to care for the product of this violent act, is some of the most perverse shit you're ever going to see. It is an incredibly weird conclusion to the movie, much like kind of like Colossus, where you're like, wait, what? This is the end of the movie?
Yeah, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, the child is a clone of their child that died, the daughter.
Yeah, once it cracks the metal skin open,
Exactly.
it's a perfect clone of their dead kid,
It's wild.
Which you can assume that, like, on one level is it's like, was Proteus doing this as like a, to fix their relationship type deal,
The whole
or was
Colossus and
Proteus
Guardian
doing
thing
this
coming together to
because it
save
would
the world?
ensure its safety,
Yeah.
that they couldn't kill their kid, it's a very bleak thing, and the only thing I was waiting for was for it to straight up go the fly mode, because it even comes out of the pod and it's like foggy and everything, and I was going,
falls
dude,
on the
are they just
ground,
gonna
it's
like
crying? It's wet. It's disgusting looking. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, are they gonna kill this baby, or is this baby gonna like attack them or something? I was kind of waiting for like an additional sequence to it, but it's like, no, that's the end. Like, it's just, are they or
embrace
are
it.
they not going to kill this clone of their child, is the sort of note that it ends on, which is, once again, very, very 70s bleakness on that one.
Yeah.
Put yourself in their shoes. What would you do? Would you kill this supercomputer hybrid baby?
Give it a couple years. We'll see what
It
happens.
depends on how good the sensation of the light show was.
Yeah. That's it. Will it entertain? That's all I care about.
And because like if the baby makes that future possible, that's what he was trying to say. But who knows? I don't.
Better to rule in hell than serve in heaven. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Let Proteus cook.
Yeah, let's see what he's got. But yeah, and that's the end of Demon Seed, which is fucking crazy. That's just the end of Demon Seed. So if we are pivoting towards reductive rating round on this one honestly got the high 3 for me. I definitely thought it was one of the weirder entries in the sort of like burgeoning science fiction horror boom at the end of the 70s there. And again, like not entirely coherent of a mix of the HAL 9000, computer overthrowing its masters, and the sort of like the Saul Bass phase 4, the sort of surreal forced evolution by a higher being, and the of course the parental and bodily autonomy anxiety stuff of Rosemary's Baby. But it was definitely an interesting one, and definitely again feels like material that the director is getting something out of or expressing something through. And, as much as it is trying to do some, pretty disturbing sort of like taboo subject matter, I don't think it's, using them completely thoughtlessly. I think it's, even if I don't know entirely how deeply it's reckoning with all of the ideas that it's bringing up, especially too when it decides to get a little bit like logistically sillier, considering how traumatizing the premise is. But I do think that Julie Christie kind of grounds the whole thing too, that she sells so much of the emotion and the tension of her being physically threatened by her own home, which again is kind of a silly image, just that her home betraying her and all of the household devices betraying her, like the fucking microwave and the sink and
the kitchen floor.
But yeah, but yeah, Camel is doing very solid for-hire directing work on it. It looks really nice. It has some really creepy atmosphere. The cinematography by Bill Butler, really good use of the claustrophobic environment. Lots of split diopters and screens, and sort of like more psychedelic images. Like not even just like the light show stuff where he's trying to have sex with Julie Christie. I'm also thinking of the crossfading between the images from inside the womb, combining with the moon and stuff like that. Like there's some crazy stuff in here. And that's before you get into the monster baby finale, which the only thing that could have made it better is if it was just a tiny bit bigger and it went full It's Alive or The Fly.
And they just shotgunned that baby.
Just do a little action scene with the baby or something, do something crazy. Cathartic, because imagine her having to perversely but cathartically like explode her child or something like that to get
exactly
rid of
like
this.
her daughter. So it just be the most, oh my god, that would be wild.
Contrasting with her like trying to protect the little child earlier and like hugging the child earlier. If Julie Christie got to kill the rape baby, I think this would be an easy form.
Nicely put. Yeah.
Which sounds like a horrible thing to say, but it's the name of the show. Come on, people.
You're on the Sleazoids podcast here,
Yeah. So, but other than that, I thought this was quite interesting, and it just made me want to further explore like Donald Campbell's like very, again, short career, because I still haven't seen Performance yet. I've only seen clips, and I have not seen Wild Side, which was the movie that he made right before killing himself.
Wild Side is a head trip, man. It's I saw it when it was released. I think I want to say that it actually premiered on HBO because it couldn't find a distributor, but it is
and it was severely cut up, and they've since released the like version that's like more what he wanted to release, I guess. That's apparently available. So.
Performance, I was wondering if the reason that Julie Christie is in this movie, which is extremely hard to understand, is because of Nicholas Roeg and the collaboration between Camel and Roeg on Performance, and the idea of like maybe he recommended it to her after Don't Look Now. Like otherwise, why she took what is really like a pure B picture. I mean, this is like not a prestigious movie at all, and in the midst of basically starring in 4 or 5 Best Picture nominees in a row, is really confusing.
And even her sillier stuff, it was like Warren Beatty stuff that was like incredibly popular.
Yes,
right,
exactly.
Yeah, I'd also give it a strong 3. Honestly, by the end, I almost floored it, and I think just if it had some of the things that we've already discussed in it, I think it could get there. It is strangely enough for how horrifying the situation is. It is kind of silly at times and a lot of fun to watch. Like, we're talking about the forced insemination of a woman by an AI, and then also we're talking about him having a laser fight with the assistant. And just like there's a lot of
decapitating him.
Yeah. And I have to say that decapitation, and then the way they do it too, they kind of hide the actual gore gag a little bit by fading away. So you see him get decapitated, and like you kind of see like blood and maybe even the head kind of roll over the pyramid thing that's squeezing him. But then it fades away into something else, and it just kind of it masks it a bit. But I really liked the effect. I thought it was really cool. I also liked the, and I think this was what I was trying to say with when the AI was manipulating Walter and using her image and kind of like the AI version of her voice to convince him that she's okay. I just found it interesting because that's becoming really popular today. Like, I'm sure you guys have heard a couple of those AI voices online with like the presidents and stuff like that. And I just found it to be interesting that they sound similar in that sense. Like there's that tone and that cadence that has that human aspect, but there's just always something in there that has that uncanny valley to it. And it was just cool to see that in 77, and now we're once again kind of dealing with it today. And I also love the look of the floating pyramid terminal or whatever it is. The way that it's like it is honestly one of the cooler parts of their the technical aspects of the film, just because the way that it presents itself first, there's this giant explosion in the glass case that it's in at first, and then it just starts to float towards them, and it just has this strangely surreal, menacing quality to it. There's even a part where it explodes the I think it's the whole kitchen floor and rises up and everything. It just has this kind of like cool epic quality to it. But yeah, I think this is it's a little bit all over the place tonally and with its ideas, but I really dug some of the silliness, and the horror aspects are actually quite effective. Those every scene with the AI doing any type of like operation or tests while she's restrained on the table, and you see all these different screens and all the robot hands just moving around her body. It's really good, and it's pretty horrifying. So yeah, strong 3. I would recommend it.
Yeah, for you, Sean.
It's a 4 for me, guys. There's no other movie that is like
there you
this.
go.
I feel like it could get there, honestly.
I would say if you revisit it in a few years, which is what I just did to prepare for this, I was just incredibly impressed by its willingness to go there. It's also like it is a lot of really good craftspeople, from MGM making a big budget version of like a very strange science fiction movie. Josh, you mentioned Bill Butler a few times. Like, Bill Butler shot The Conversation. He shot One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. You know what I mean? Like he is a high class cinematographer working with this kind of material.
The composer is Jerry Fielding, who
exactly.
what did Outlaw Josie Wales, Escape from Alcatraz, The Wild Bunch, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia.
Fantastic.
Yeah, this is not, and it is during a time when that sort of thing could happen. And in keeping with my obsession with like what the studio was doing at that time, MGM, unlike all of the other studios, which were releasing many, many movies in any given year, in 76 and 77, they started to slow down a lot. They only released 3 movies in one calendar year period from November 76 to November 77. They released Network in November of 76, Demon Seed in April of 77, and The Goodbye Girl in November of 77. That is weird. Like, what is the development crew on those 3 films? The fact that they have like, a Best Picture nominee followed up directly by Demon Seed is remarkable. Like, it was a completely different time in Hollywood. Camel obviously is a singular figure. Clearly a very disturbed guy. And the themes that he's interested in, even in the context of a Sleazoids episode, he's really pretty out there. Because you can sense that there's like some psychological, some analysis that he's doing on himself as he tells some of these stories. And once you see Wild Side, you'll see what I mean.
Maybe don't look up the age of his wife while he made this film.
Exactly.
Just if you don't want to have your day ruined.
Not the maybe not a great guy. I think it's fair to say.
No,
but but an interesting artist, and this is like an amazing experiment in big Hollywood meeting a few fractured minds. So I think it's a really cool movie.
Yeah. Well, I think that is going to wrap it up for this week's episode. That was Colossus, the Forbin Project from 1970 and Demon Seed from 1977. Thanks so much, Sean, for joining us and for bringing these out there
thank you.
films with you. This is normally where we have people plug stuff. So what's going on in Ringer world? Anything interesting coming out?
Yeah, I mean, just check me out on The Big Picture. I'm on the Rewatchables podcast from time to time. I promise we will not be doing Demon Seed anytime soon. But I dig this show. So
I'd like to hear Bill's opinion.
I don't. Well, he loves Julie Christie, so you never know. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. In the meantime, thanks so much. Like, I think this is a great show, and I love discovering movies, listening to you guys talk about them. So this was fun for me to hopefully push people in the direction of a couple of interesting ones.
Hell yeah. Thanks,
awesome.
man.
Yeah. Thanks so much, man. And for our listeners, we are going to be back in 1 week's time, where we are going to be continuing in the science fiction mode, where we are going to be meeting up with some aliens. And there is a little bit of AI, I believe, in the first feature. We're going to be talking about The Day the Earth Stood Still, directed by Robert Wise, the 50s science fiction classic, one I have not seen in a very long time, and I'm excited to revisit. And we're going to be pairing it with Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Let's go.
I think only the second or third time we're going to be talking about Spielberg, but back in the news for losing all of the Oscars that he lost. I'm definitely excited to go back to that one. And so that's going to be a fun episode where we're going to be talking about not our relationship necessarily to computers and AI, but to just a great other and to aliens and what else could be out there. And the 2 weeks from now so that episode is going to be on the Patreon exclusively. Again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast for anyone interested in that episode. And it is going to perfectly tee up the episode on aliens that we are going to be doing in 2 weeks' time over on the main feed with a special guest, where we are going to be talking about John Carpenter's Starman.
Nice.
Which I heard a lot of people say that there's a little bit of Close Encounters in there, and there's a little bit of, kind of like a friendly alien taking human form and trying to kind of figure his way out from there. But I've never seen Starman. It's actually it might even be my biggest John Carpenter blind spot. So I'm really excited to finally fill that one because the guest picked it, and we're going to be pairing it with something that actually connects to this week's episode: The Man Who Fell to Earth, directed by Nicholas Roeg, who co-directed Performance with Donald Cammell, and who also directed Don't Look Now, starring Julie Christie.
Which is great.
So we're going to be talking about his David Bowie alien film, The Man Who Fell to Earth, will be the pairing with Starman. So we're going. We didn't entirely intend to it, but we are doing almost like a month of science fiction right now.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. I feel like it's probably the one we least talk about, or maybe that's just my feeling about it, but it's cool.
We definitely cover action and horror more than science fiction.
Yeah.
So it feels good to kind of stretch out and do a bunch of science fiction in a row.
Yeah, I'm
stick
stoked.
in that realm a little bit. Get some classics out of the way too, I want to talk about some 50 sci-fi is such kind of an under discussed thing in general, it feels like now. If anyone's going to talk about the Body Snatchers films or something, they're not going to talk about the Don Siegel one. They're going to talk about the 70s one. Yeah. That's kind of where people kind of go with it. But yeah, I want to go back and do the original. And also Keanu Reeves was in the remake, and he's got a John Wick movie on the way. There's lots of connections out there.
Yeah, so I'm gonna watch the remake that I know nobody likes, but I'm gonna do it.
You know what? I feel like I kind of remember watching it, but I don't remember anything about it. I remember thinking it was bad, but you know what? This might even be good reason to revisit it too.
Exactly.
Might do that too. But yeah, that is going to be what's coming up for the next couple weeks. So look forward to that. But that being said, that wraps it up for everything this week. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.